Hello everyone, I'm Robert. Welcome to Tabletop Tutorials. In this video, I will be teaching you how to play Episode 1 of Perseverance Castaway Chronicles on Tabletopia. Please keep in mind that Tabletopia is currently using a digital version of the prototype and that there is a chance that changes could happen between what you see here and what you see when the game is released. Currently, Episodes 1 and 2 for Perseverance are on Kickstarter, and you can find the link to that in the description below, as well as a link to our video for Episode 2. Once the final version of the game is available, you will also be able to find the link to our How to Play video for that version, just in case you still find your way to this one, so be sure to check the links below. With all of that out of the way, let's get into the game. In Episode 1, you will take the role of an ambitious, charismatic survivor of the shipwrecked luxury liner, the Pearl of the Sea. Your goal is to demonstrate your skills as a leader to help provide as much support as possible in defending and building up your new home, Perseverance. In doing so, your fellow survivors, now fellow citizens, will reward your bravery in combat during the ever-prevalent Dino Attacks and pledge their vote for you whenever it comes time for an assembly. The more influential you become as a leader, the more followers you will gain as the chief officers of the Pearl of the Sea and citizens of Perseverance take notice of your skill. But be wary, you can lose followers as the citizens lose faith in you. To find out more about the story of Perseverance Castaway Chronicles, please follow the links below to its Kickstarter campaign, Board Game Geek page, and Mind Clash Games webpage. The main board for Episode 1 has been divided into two different areas. The top area is the defense area, where your leader and soldiers will combat dinos, and the bottom area is the community area, where you will place dice and your leader to take your actions throughout the game. We will discuss each one of these in more detail as they become relevant, but first, while Tabletopia does take care of most of the game's setup, there are a few things that you still need to do. For Step 2 of setup, you need to randomly cover up 3 combat rewards with the combat reward tiles. The top 2 rewards are always available, so you will only be randomly deciding between the ones that are numbered below. As a quick and easy way to choose which ones to cover, it is recommended that you shuffle and draw 3 cards from one of the challenge reward decks and to cover the spaces that match the numbers on the cards. For Step 13, you will need to set up the starting patrol cards by first shuffling this top deck. On Tabletopia, the 5 cards that you will randomly choose between, Dino Veritas, Clever Girl, Cornered, Teamwork, and Sleeping Beastie, have been pre-sorted into a separate deck so you can just shuffle these and draw 2 cards. The rest will be shuffled into the deck below. For Step 16, if this is your first game, or you want to use the recommended default setup, then there are only 2 things you need to do. First, place an influence cube from your reserve to the leftmost space on the officer card that is below the zone in which your starting settlement is placed. Now, you have to decide the starting player. The rules state that the player last on a boat is the starting player, though you can decide starting player through any method your group agrees on, with turn order moving clockwise. If you do not want to use the recommended default setup, everyone will need to remove their settlements from the main board. You can leave the officers below the zone they are currently assigned to, this is their default zone, or randomly assign them to zones. Now, in reverse player order, you will each place a settlement onto the bottommost space in a zone, and an influence marker onto the leftmost space on the officer assigned to that zone. You are now all set to begin playing the game. The rest of this video will explain the rules for Episode 1. To make this video an easier reference during gameplay, I will include each section as a timestamp in the description below. On your turn, the first thing you'll do is resolve any patrol cards that you might have. To speed up game flow, it is possible to do this during the turns of other players, but you must remember that any rewards you might receive are not available during an assembly or dino attack that is triggered before your next turn. Next, you'll choose a primary action that you want to take and place a die from the dice pool onto one of the spaces for that action. You must take a primary action, and the spaces of each action can be either restricted or unrestricted. When choosing a die, you may choose any one from the dice pool, but you lose 2 followers if you choose an opponent's die. Remember that the player with the most followers at the end of the game is the winner, so you will want to be careful about placing your opponent's dice when it's not necessary. If the die you choose has an icon that matches a free, restricted space on the action, then you have to place the die on that space. If the die you choose does not match a restricted space, you can place it on any unrestricted one. You can spend 1 story to change the face of the die you want to place. So let's say that you have chosen to take the fortification action, and you want to use this die with an innovator icon. Because there are free restricted spaces that have an innovator icon, you must place the die on one of these. If, however, you chose to place a die with a different icon, then you could place that on any of these free unrestricted spaces. You could also place a die with an innovator icon on any free unrestricted space if these restricted ones were full. Next, if your chosen space has a dino and/or dino roll icon next to it, resolve these from top to bottom. First, place any shown tramplers and raptors directly onto empty spaces, following the arrows, in the defense area of the zone where you took your action. Any spaces with a trap token count as an empty space. Then, roll the relevant dino die and place any shown dinos the same way. You will roll the standard dino die until the area becomes dangerous, at which point you will roll the dangerous die. Don't worry, I'll cover this a little later. If at any point you need to place more dinos than the defense area has free spaces, place as many as possible and ignore the rest. After you have finished placing any required dinos, you will resolve your chosen action. Let's take a minute to go over the available primary actions and how they are resolved. The primary actions for Perseverance are located on the main board in each zone. I'll go over each zone from left to right and explain each of the actions the zone contains. In the Sustenance zone, you can place a die in this column to take a rations action and receive 2 food. In this column, you can place a die to take a patrol action, which lets you combat dinos that have appeared around the city. After placing your die for a patrol action, immediately take one of the 2 face-up patrol cards, replacing it with the top card of the patrol deck. Each patrol card can have 1 or 2 stages and will show a minimum number of required soldiers. If you cannot place the required number of soldiers, then you cannot take that patrol card, and you cannot take this action if you cannot take a patrol card. Also note, you cannot have more than 1 patrol card with 2 stages at a time. If you already have a Stage 2 patrol card, you cannot take another. There is no limit, however, to the number of 1-stage patrol cards you can have. Once you have selected a patrol card, you will assign at least the required number of soldiers, but no more than 8, and will place a stage marker on it if it has 2 stages. Any soldiers assigned to a patrol card will remain on that patrol until the card is resolved on your next turn. When it is time to resolve your patrol card, the first thing you'll do is to receive all rewards for the current stage. If the stage shows 1 or more challenge cards, draw a card for each soldier from their type's deck, choosing to keep up to the number shown on the patrol card. So, if the patrol card shows 2 challenge cards, and you have 3 light soldiers and 1 heavy soldier present, you will draw a total of 4 cards, 3 from the light soldiers deck and 1 from the heavy soldiers, and keep up to 2 of them. For the cards you choose to keep, immediately receive any rewards shown and resolve any threat shown. If you roll a number on the threat die that is lower than the threat shown on the card, you must return a soldier matching the card's type from the patrol to the supply. If you have at least 1 surviving soldier, and your patrol card has a second stage, you can choose to either keep all soldiers on the card to move to the second stage, or to not proceed and receive your soldiers back to your reserve. When choosing to move to the second stage, you will see a threat displayed. This threat is resolved just as with the challenge cards, but you may choose a soldier of any type to lose if you fail the roll. If you lose your last soldier to the threat between stages, or if you choose not to proceed or have no second stage to proceed to, place the patrol card face down in front of you, It will be relevant for the Chief of Security's scoring later. The last action in the sustenance zone is the pub action. Here, you'll gain stories equal to the number of dice you currently have in play, meaning those that are on the board and still in the dice pool, +1. So, right now, red would receive 2 stories because they only have 1 red die in the dice pool. In the training zone, you can place a die to take any 3 different options from those listed below. When you choose one of the options, you'll pay the required resource and gain the shown result. The top choice lets you gain 1 light soldier from your supply, placing it on your player board. For the second option, you'll pay 1 food to gain 1 light soldier. You pay 1 modern resource to gain 1 heavy soldier for the third option. For the fourth, you pay 1 story to convert up to 2 light soldiers on your player board to heavy soldiers. Next, the fifth option lets you pay 1 story to place up to 2 soldiers into the defense area. Finally, this last option allows you to lose 1 follower to gain a story. You can choose to take your 3 different options from these 6 in any order. In the expansion zone, you have 3 actions. For the politics action, you'll place a die here to do one of the 2 options. The first allows you to pay 1 food to replace a neutral die in the pool with one of yours, turn to the same face, and then gain 1 follower for each of your dice in play, which includes those that are on the main board and in the pool. The second option allows you to spend 1 food and 1 story to replace a neutral die on the main board with one of yours, set to the same face, then gain 2 followers. Keep in mind that you can never have more than 5 of your dice in play at once, so once your 5th enters play, you cannot take the politics action again. When you take a social aid action, you will receive both 1 modern resource and 1 food. The last action of the expansion zone is the settlement action. Here, you'll be able to place your settlements into the community areas of the various zones and receive the settlement bonus for the space you chose. This action has 2 options for you to choose from. The first allows you to spend 1 food to place 1 settlement onto any space in any community area and receive the space's placement bonus. The second allows you to spend 1 story, 1 modern resource, and 1 food to place a settlement into 2 different community areas, but you can only receive the bonus for one of the spaces. You can choose whichever one you would prefer. Keep in mind that settlement spaces 7 through 10 are only available after the zone has its first Dino Attack and becomes dangerous. These spaces have better placement bonuses, but they are also more susceptible to attack if a breach occurs. The protection zone is the last of our 4 zones and contains 2 actions. The first, salvage, allows you to gain 2 modern resources. The fortifications action allows you to choose 2 different options from those below, in any order. The first allows you to place one of your traps on an empty dino space in any defense area. The second also lets you place one of your traps on any empty dino space in any defense area, but costs 1 food and gives you 1 valor. For the third, you'll spend 1 modern resource to place one of your walls onto any empty wall space in any defense area, and the final option allows you to spend 1 story and 1 modern resource to place one of your walls onto any empty wall space in any defense area and gain 2 followers. You cannot choose the same option twice, but you are allowed to place 2 traps or 2 walls in one action by choosing both of their respective options. After resolving your primary action, you'll choose to perform one of your 4 secondary action options. The first is to place 1 to 2 soldiers on empty soldier spaces in any defense area. They do not need to be placed in the same defense area. There are 2 separate rows that you can place soldiers in. You receive 1 valor for each soldier placed in the top row, and 1 safeguard for each soldier placed in the bottom row. You can track this with the respective trackers on your player board. The second option is to place your leader onto a leader space of a community area. You can only do this if your leader is still in your reserve and not already on the board, and the community area does not already have a leader in its leader space. After placing your leader, resolve any one action in that zone without placing any dinos. Remember, any leader placed in a community area will remain there until an assembly is resolved. Your third option is to place your leader in a defense area. For this action, you will place your leader onto any empty soldier space as long as your leader is not already on the main board. Then, you will receive 2 Valor or Safeguard, 1 more than if you had placed a soldier. Remember that your leader will stay in a defense area until a Dino Attack is resolved, and that more than one leader can be present in a single defense area. The final option is to spend 0, 2, or 4 stories to place 1, 2, or 3 influence cubes on an officer. Each officer only has 3 or 4 influence spaces, depending on player count, and once these are filled, even if you still have more influence to place, the players with the most cubes on these spaces immediately receive the bonus printed on the officer. The only exception would be if there is a 4-way tie. In this case, no one would receive a bonus. Then, all cubes are moved from the spaces to the officer card, and you continue placing any remaining influence. 2 things to keep in mind here. You only have 15 influence cubes total, and you cannot move them between officers or remove them from officers. You also cannot split the influence you place between different officers. It must all go to the same one. After resolving your secondary action, there are 2 checks you must perform before the next player can begin their turn. First, you must check if a Dino Attack needs to be resolved by seeing if all Dino spaces are full for the zone where you just took your action. If they are, then a Dino Attack happens. If no Dino Attack needs to be resolved, then you will check to see if an assembly needs to be by seeing if the dice pool is empty. If no Dino Attack and no assembly needs to be resolved, then the next player can start their turn. At the end of your turn, if all of the Dino spaces in a zone's defense area are filled, a Dino Attack is triggered, but only in that zone. If your turn triggers both an assembly and a Dino Attack, the Dino Attack is triggered first. A Dino Attack is split into 6 phases: the Trap Phase, Wall Phase, Fight Phase, Breach Phase, Combat Rewards Phase, and the Retrieve Phase. In the Trap Phase, all traps in the zone, regardless of player, are flipped face up and the trap die is rolled. If the rolled die shows a trap with a check mark and a killed dino, the trap owner gains the amount of followers shown and places the dino in front of them. Otherwise, they do not gain any followers or remove the dino. If the rolled die shows a killed dino, the trap owner gains the 2 followers and the dino. If the rolled die only shows 2 followers, the trap owner gains the followers and the dino stays. Then, in the wall phase, you will roll the wall die for each wall present, with the owner of the wall gaining the followers or safeguard shown. If the rolled die also shows a dino skull, the wall's owner places the dino in front of them. Next, in the fight phase, the remaining dinos attack the soldiers and vice versa. First, you will resolve combat for all soldiers and leaders in the first row, then combat for those in the second row. A light soldier kills the closest dino in their column, and a heavy soldier or leader kills the 2 closest dinos in their column. Simultaneously, a raptor will kill the soldier that killed it, but tramplers do not attack soldiers. Just like with walls and traps, any dinos that are removed are given to the player that removed them. Killed soldiers, however, are left in the defense area and only toppled over. I find the easiest way to do this on Tabletopia is to place the soldiers slightly off of its space to remember that they didn't survive the attack. Let's take a look at and resolve an example Dino Attack. Here, we can see that all of the training zone's dino spaces have been filled, so a Dino Attack must be resolved. For this example, we will use the red player as our current player. The first thing you do during a dino attack is to resolve any traps that are present. So this dino will move to the side while we flip up the trap and roll the trap die. For the sake of this example, I will select a specific die face instead of doing a random roll. The die landed with a face that shows that we can only remove the dino and receive the follower if the dino matches the type for the trap, which it does not. So we will put the trampler back on top of the trap for now. Since that was the only trap, you move on to resolving any walls present. There is one wall in this defense area belonging to the green player, so that player will roll the wall die. Again, I will choose a die face for the sake of the example. Since the die landed on a dino's skull and a safeguard, the trampler will be removed and green will gain a safeguard. Next, all combats will be resolved in each column. In this first column, the light soldier will kill the dino closest to them, the raptor, and the raptor will also kill the soldier. The raptor will go to the green player's reserve. Since the light soldier couldn't attack the trampler, it will remain on the board. Because this soldier was killed, we will place it slightly off of its space. In the second column, the heavy soldier kills up to 2 dinos, but since there is just the one, the red player will only get the trampler. In the third column, there is no soldier, so we will skip that column for now and move to the fourth. Here, the heavy soldier will kill the only trampler, which goes to the red player's reserve. Now, since dinos remain, we move to the second row of soldiers. In the second column, there are no dinos left for this light soldier to fight, so they are skipped and we move over to green's leader, Keone. Leaders kill 2 dinos, so both the trampler and the raptor in this column will be removed and placed in green's reserve. Leaders cannot die, so the raptor doesn't kill anything in this column. If there are no remaining dinos, then the defense was successful, and you can skip straight to the combat rewards phase. If any dinos remain after the fight phase, however, a breach phase happens. For each surviving trampler, remove the topmost settlement in the zone. Each surviving raptor attacks one settlement in the zone from top to bottom. The same settlement is never attacked twice, so if there are more raptors than there are settlements, ignore any leftover raptors. Each player loses 2 followers for every one of their settlements that was attacked by a raptor. The active player loses 2 followers for every dino that breached. Set aside 1 Grateful Citizen token for each breaching dino. These will not be available during the combat rewards phase. Now, return all breaching dinos to the supply. I often return the dino to the supply after I resolve their breach so that it is easier to keep track of what is left. After all breaching dinos have been resolved, you can start the combat rewards phase by counting the number of pieces each player has in the defense area. This includes their traps, walls, soldiers, and leader. This is their combat contribution. In descending contribution order, breaking ties in favor of the next player in turn order, each player will take turns choosing 1 available combat reward by placing a Grateful Citizen token on the empty reward space and paying the associated safeguard or valor cost, or passing and ending their combat rewards phase. Players will continue taking turns until either no Grateful Citizen tokens remain or every player has passed. Note that 1 reward has a cost of a light soldier, which must be paid with a surviving light soldier from the attacked defense area. Lastly, a retrieval phase is performed. Here, you will return all of your surviving soldiers, face-up traps, and your leader from the attack defense area to your reserve. Keep all traps returned face-up as they cannot be used again, but may be scored with the Chief Engineer's scoring condition. All walls remain in place and all toppled soldiers and killed dinos, meaning those that were placed into the reserve of a player, are returned to the general supply. If this was the first time that the zone was attacked, remove the Dangerous Combat Area tile from the 3rd row of the combat area and remove the Community Area cover tile from the top spaces of the community area. Now, return all grateful citizen tokens from the combat reward tiles and that were set aside to their pool. The Dino Attack phase has been resolved. You would either resolve an assembly or continue to the next player's turn, depending on whether or not dice remain in the dice pool. If there are no dice left in the pool at the end of your turn, an assembly is triggered. In a 3 or 4 player game, there will be 3 assemblies, but a 2-player game will only have 2. All of these will be resolved in exactly the same way. The first step in an assembly is to determine which player has the most presence in each zone. This is the player with the most pieces, including dice, settlements, and possibly their leader, in that zone's community area. The player with the most presence receives that zone's assembly reward tile. When looking at this tile, you will notice that it has a different option on each side. This side shows 2 times the zone's production, which is the resource shown, and this shows votes for the zone. The number of votes you get is referred to as that zone's population, which is determined by adding 2 to the number of settlements, regardless of color, present in that zone. On Tabletopia, you can bring the tile to the bottom of your screen so that it is placed in your hand for the next step. In the case of a tie in a 2-player game, each player automatically receives the zone's production once, or if 2 players tie in a 3 or 4-player game, each tied player receives votes equal to half of the zone's population rounded down, instead of the tile. If more than 2 players tie for presence in a zone, no players receive anything. After presence has been determined in each zone and the assembly reward tiles have been handed out, each player with at least 1 tile will secretly choose production or votes using the tile's respective sides. Once all players have chosen, they will simultaneously reveal their choice to the other players. If you choose production, you receive the resource of that zone's production twice. This is why the tile shows a ×2. If you choose votes, you receive the votes equal to the population of the zone. Votes are tracked on the vote track on your player board. If a player was second highest for presence in that zone, they receive half of the reward for that zone that was not chosen, so the zone's production once or half of the votes rounded down. If more than 2 players tie for second highest presence, then no one receives anything. Next, assembly scoring is resolved. To do this, compare the total number of votes that each player received during the previous step and before the assembly. Based on their vote ranking, each player will receive a number of followers as shown on the current assembly scoring tile. In the case of a tie, add up the total followers for the tied players' places. 2 players tied for the first would add first and second, whereas 2 tied for second would add up second and third, and divide by the number of tied players. Each player gets this many followers rounded down. The next step is officer scoring. Here, you will determine the player or players with the most influence on each officer. This includes the influence cubes on the tile and in the influence slots, and they receive followers based on the scoring condition. No modifiers are made in the case of a tie. All players will receive the followers. Then, any players with the second most influence receive half of the followers, rounded down. Here is what you get for having the most influence on an officer. The chief mate gives 1 follower for each cube you have on another officer's card where you are not in the majority. Keep in mind that being tied for majority does not count as being in the majority. The chief of security gives 2 followers for every patrol card you have in front of you, both completed and in progress. The chief steward gives 3 followers for each set of 2 settlements and 1 die that you have on the board, regardless of whether or not they are in the same zone. And finally, the chief engineer gives 1 follower for every wall and trap you have placed during the game. The last step in an assembly is to perform the wrap-up phase. First, shift all assembly scoring tiles to the left one space, removing the leftmost one from the game. In a 4-player game only, and if this is the first assembly, remove one neutral die from the game and return it to the box as depicted in the top left corner of the now active assembly scoring tile. Now, retrieve your leader if it is placed on a community space. Next, collect all dice from the board and re-roll them to create a new dice pool. Then, the 2 available patrol cards go to the bottom of the deck and 2 new ones are drawn. Lastly, each player's vote tracker is reset back to 0. Play now resumes with the next player's turn as normal unless this was the last assembly, which would be the second in a 2-player game or the third in a 3 or 4-player game. If it was the last assembly of the game ends immediately. If any player has an ongoing patrol, they must immediately resolve the current stage, including any received rewards. The patrol is now considered complete and they cannot choose to advance to any further stage if one exists. Once all open patrols have been resolved, final scoring is determined. First, add up each player's contribution across all defense areas. Remember, this is all walls, traps, soldiers for each player plus their leader, if present. Players will then gain followers based on their contribution order and the game's player count as shown in the rulebook and on the player aids. Then, each player gains 1 follower for each soldier they have on the main board and on their player board, plus 1 for each food, modern resource, and story they still have. Lastly, each player gains 2 followers for each pair of 1 safeguard and 1 valor they still have. The player with the most followers is the winner. If multiple players tie, the winner is the player with the most total soldiers. Remember, this includes those on the main board and their player board. If any players are still tied, they share in the win. Thank you for watching this Tabletop Tutorials rules explanation. I hope you now have a better understanding of the rules for Episode 1 of Perseverance Castaway Chronicles. As a reminder, Episodes 1 and 2 are both on Kickstarter now and are still considered prototypes, so both games might change compared to what you see currently. Please keep this in mind and check the description below to see if there is a link to a video showing a final production rules explanation. If you have any questions regarding this game, please follow the links in the description to the game's pages on BGG and Kickstarter, and Emanuela, myself, one of the designers, or someone from Mindclash will make sure you get an answer as soon as possible. Perseverance Castaway Chronicles is published by Mindclash Games. You can find more information on Perseverance, as well as Mindclash Games' other games at mindclashgames.com. Thank you for watching, and happy gaming.